Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Boots on the Ground here on STL Sports Central. I am your host, alongside Will Bratton, Matthew Rocchio, and we're here for another week breaking down City SC soccer. It was a wild one this week, facing off against the LA Galaxy, a 3-3 tie, 6 insane goals all around between St. Louis City and LA Galaxy, and we're here to dive into the nitty-gritty of this game, as we always do. Weird week for St. Louis City. No midweek training. Everyone's off on a 5-day break that ends tonight. They will be back for Friday morning training, as we are recording this on a Thursday evening. And so we'll finally get a little bit more City news on Friday. So we're going to break down the LA Galaxy game, taking you into a gameless weekend. And so let's get into it right off the bat. Will Bratton, always here with me today. A 3-3 draw, they say. Sometimes draws feel like wins. Sometimes they feel like losses. And after taking a point from the jaws of defeat late in the game, does that draw feel more like a win or a loss to you?
It feels more like a win in the moment, but in reality, it's more like a loss because you needed all 3 points there against a weak LA Galaxy team. So you didn't get the job done. Thankfully, you salvaged a point with a little bit of Joao Klauss heroics with the first hat trick in club history. I mean, you love to see that. You want to see your DP9 get going. You want to see him scoring goals. You want to see him being impactful. And so that's great stuff to see. And no complaints about that. My complaints are you give up a couple of pretty bad defensive errors and you lose 2 points, again, from a winning position. I believe that's 18 points from winning positions on the year. And that's a really high number for match 18. So for me, that one feels like a loss, even though in the moment it was pretty fun with the Joao Klauss screamer at the end. It was pretty fun and it felt like a win for half a second. And then my brain reminded me that you didn't get 3 points and you needed 3 points.
Yeah, and that's for me. I was pretty negative in the post game after the game, and I feel like I was justified in that negativity for the most part because it was such a rough day to lose 2 points like they did, and that's what happened when it came down to it. And it could have been worse, obviously, if Painstill doesn't screw up that pass on what would have been a sitter for Nascimento. It's potentially worse. Obviously, some breaks go the favor of LA Galaxy, so you can argue that the 3-2 stat line could have been closer to a 3-2 or a 3-3 stat line, could have been closer to a 3-2 St. Louis City win, but it could have broken the other way pretty easily. And when you look at their ability to beat this team 3-0 in LA at the beginning of the season, when obviously things weren't going to go very well afterwards, it's a disappointing 1 point. And even with a week to reflect and rewatching the game, there are a lot of positivities, but I can't get over the actual results when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and that's totally a fair reaction. It is unfortunate too. At LA, you had one of your healthiest rosters of the year, and you didn't have Leuven, you didn't have Durkin in this match. Your 2 key components in the midfield. You didn't have Giannis Horn. He was on the bench, but I don't even think he ever warmed up. I think he was in the squad, but I don't think he ever actually did warm-ups. So he wasn't a contributing factor in that match. So, and obviously Tots wasn't fit for 90 as well. So that's unfortunate for the team for sure, but you still needed to get 3 points. We know that's something City can do, and it looks like we're going to take a look into some of these passing networks here too.
Yeah, let's dive into that. This is from the 3-3 game, and we have the first half and the second half, and that's what's awesome with our friends over at McLackbot. They do an incredible job over on their app, so we can break it down into how things looked in the first half and then how things looked in the second half. And the big thing for me that jumps out, obviously, in both of them is just how high Thomas Totland is playing. Essentially, in the first half, you're playing what really looked more like a 3-back than a 4-back for a lot of that first half. And then in the second half, because they're pushing up high so often, it essentially was that 2-back with the defensive midi dropping into to give you some solidity there. But also just look at the positioning, and we're going to get into this more when we look at the screenshots in City circuits coming up, but the positioning of Joao Klauss also really has to jump out to you, as well as Marcel Hartl, because if you see there in the first half on the left, Marcel Hartl and Celio Pompeiu's average positioning was almost the exact same spot right there. Klauss is behind Simon Bescher, who, although he's listed as a right midi, is the nominal striker in his average positioning in that first half. And then in the second half, things flat out. We saw a lot of 4 and 5 man attacking fronts from St. Louis City where they were able to get Pompeu, Hartle, Klauss, Bescher, and Tots, and that's exactly the 5-man kind of attack that you see developing in that second half passing network. And this is what I'm talking about. Again, 3-3 at the very top of the screen. That's crappy. You don't want to see that. That's a bad Saturday. But when you take a look at this passing network and you take a look at some of the numbers with the progressive passes received, progressive passes completed, those kind of numbers, you see that Marcel Hartle had a high number of progressive passes attempted, 9 alone in the second half. That's what you want to see. João Klauss received 9 progressive passes. That's 9 passes moving 10 yards towards the opposition's net. That's a huge amount relative to what we've seen from City. And so this is why, despite the actual end, there's so much positive to take out of the offensive sides of that game.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you look at João Klauss in the first half, also 7 progressive passes received. So that's going to total out to 16 progressive passes received. And insane. I mean, that's a lot. That's almost averaging 2 per 10 minutes. Like it's almost averaging 1 every 5 minutes. And that's really good for a relatively low possession St. Louis team. Like really, really good. So, that's something that you want to see for sure. Progressive passes completed. You want to see Marcel Hartle there all the time. He needs to be one of your focal points, whether he's getting the ball to Bescher, Klauss, Pompeu, even a run up high from Totland or something like that, maybe even Jay Reed, whatever it may be. That needs to be your one of your biggest progressive passers. I would like to see Timo Baumgartel kind of get in that conversation with progressive passes completed. Obviously, you see in progressive passes attempted. In the second half, he was third with 6 progressive passes attempted.
It's always going to be a lower percentage with him because he's hoofing it. He's hoofing it a little bit.
Right, but I would love to see some more of those land for him. And in the first half, I would love to see more than 4 attempted from him for sure. I mean, Roman Berkey being your leader in progressive passes attempted is a little bit strange in the first half. I think that shows because the first half was a little more around the pitch. For City, I think there were a lot of players who had 2 progressive passes attempted, I would guess. So that's you still have plenty received with Bescher and Klauss combining for 15 alone. So
I mean, there's 2 people in the progressive passes completed top 3 of St. Louis City in both halves, and it's Marcel Hartle and Roman Berkey. And that's because, to your point, Marcel Hartle is the straw that stirs the drink up at the top. And what we've been talking about in our first couple episodes of Boots on the Ground, what we are going to be talking about here in episode 3 is that Roman Berkey gets things started from the back. And that's not just us. David Critchley, you can go to the post game this past week, talks about how Roman Berkey is the first person in their attack and the strikers are the first person in their defense. It's that kind of reverse importance of the person farthest away from where you think is going to matter the most. Roman Berkey is so crucial to this attack, and we're going to see that more on as we go through some of the very crucial goals from João Klauss later on. One thing I do want to point out, because you're talking about getting Timo Baumgartel going, one of these things that we need to look at on these wonderful assets that are provided to us by people like McLackbot is that you can see at the very bottom, in the bottom right corner, there's a little color gradient where the XT per pass goes from 0.0 to 0.04. Purple's good. Blues average. You want to see more purple, pink, whatever, magenta, whatever you're personally seeing on the screen right now. Look at the second half, left center back to Marcel Hartle. That's the biggest and most pink thing in the second half, which means that per those progressive passes that he actually completed from Timo Baumgartel, they were getting a huge amount of XT, which is essentially just a grade of how useful the pass is in build up and creating goals in the long run. So right there, you can see a lot of purple in the first half. Tomas Totland to Simon Bescher, purple. It looks like Marcel Hartle to Simon Bescher, purple, or maybe that's Celio Pompeu to Bescher. I think it's Hartle to Bescher. Purple, also, it's not fully as much as the other ones, but you can see a little bit there of Timo Baumgartel in the first half, purple with Tomas Totland. So I think, to your point, you're 100% correct. But I think we're letting ourselves we're getting into the long ball numbers for Baum, which is the numbers are always going to be crappier when you're hoofing it 40, 50 yards. And that's what Baum's doing. But if you look at this, when he does connect, and when he did connect with those progressive passes up the field, they were a huge boon to the St. Louis City offense, whether it was to Totland in the first half or Marcel Hartl in the second half. Baum had a great passing game.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I guess kind of to reiterate what I'm trying to say is just that I want to see him have more than 4 attempted in that first half. I think he actually did have 4 attempted. I think there were a lot of players probably who had 4 attempted, because on the progressive passes attempted in the first half, you see Berkey, Tots, and Hartl. But in progressive passes completed, you also see Timo Baumgartel there with 4. So he definitely had at least 4 attempts. He was probably 4 for 4.
4 for 4.
And so that's good. And I think that's why he's showing up purple, because these are productive passes and they have a pretty high success rate, which is why I want to see him get more, a higher quantity of attempts, because I think that'll lead to good things for this team. And I really do think, I'm glad you pointed this out. I think the Timo Baumgartel to Tomas Totland link up is a lot more impactful than a lot of folks might realize. In terms of switching the play, you get a lot of space when you switch the play like that. So that's where you get Joao Klauss and Simon Betcher to get those 2-on-2 opportunities. And those are always favorable. So that's a very important passing network to look at. And honestly, this is one of the prettier maps that we've seen from City in a little while. I kind of
that is a gross understatement. You didn't need to add the qualifier. This is far and away the best looking passing map. And in fact, it's the only time in this season, maybe not the only time, but it's one of the very few times this season where you could just isolate the passing map to the attacking half, and it actually looked like a passing map. Usually this season,
it's looked
when
like
you use this, there's been like 3 positions out of the 10 in the attacking half that actually have any blue lines connecting them, which just shows you how few they actually pass the ball in the attacking half. And to that point, they actually did win the field tilt. Something we talked about last week. David Critchley was talking about how much better they've been doing with the field tilt. I was confused because the numbers didn't bear that out. Well, the numbers bared that out against one of the worst teams in the league this week. You did win the field tilt battle, so they do they do have that rolling to them.
Yes. And then I just wanted to touch on only one more thing on this, and it's actually not related to the stats. I just wanted to, XT is a little bit of a newer stat. It's not used as widely. It's a little more nuanced to understand. So Rock, if you could just give a quick little breakdown for the fans who maybe aren't familiar with XT. I know you kind of touched on it a moment ago, but if you could give your best definition of XT per pass and kind of why those numbers are low and all those types of things to help fans kind of understand what that stat means, I think that might be helpful.
That's a good question as to why the delta is so low. I actually do not know why they use such a low range of delta on this on that one. That's actually a really good question. That's one thing I actually never dove into that part of the methodology. I just kind of took it as, hey, listen, this is the numbers they use. They kick out a small delta, and we'll roll with it there. Essentially, XT, like anything, like you see XG, you see why am I blanking on the other one? G plus. It's essentially a way to equate everything that happens in a play and try to give each pass, within a game, a value to how it contributes to increasing your goal, a chance to score a goal. So essentially, think of XT as all the little data points inside of XG. Essentially, I would kind of be one way to look at it. And so XT is trying a way to say, instead of just looking at the end product of the XG, let's try to isolate every other move that happens before. It's a lot like G plus in that let's isolate every data point in a play beforehand so that we can say, here's all these little things, and let's give a round number that says this pass does, increases your chance to score by this much on a 10,000, 100,000 point basis. So it's essentially like all those little, those stats. It's just trying to figure out a better way to quantify what players do, i.e., how do you know that Timo Baumgartel's progressive passes are a useful aspect? XT is a way to break that down.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I would think that's probably going to be very helpful for a lot of fans who aren't super familiar with that stat, as it is so specific. And honestly, relatively new. I don't even think that stat really existed probably like 5 years ago. Maybe it did. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's definitely newer to me within the last 2 years. I think maybe it was the first time I'd seen it. So
yeah, I mean, like
insight there.
Like anything, it's going to be just where's the ball and are you getting the ball in a more advantageous position from where it started? Essentially, it's like the same way that XG takes. Where's the ball? Where's the goalie? Where's the defender? XT is saying within your possession, is the ball moving through zones? And also, how is it doing it? Carries, passes, those kind of things. It's all just trying to isolate it into one number. And there's flaws to that. And that's why when we look at these things, it's one aspect of it. It's not just, okay, there's purple, he had a good game. No, you got to break down the context around these numbers, which is why we eventually dive into things a little bit deeper with the screenshots, with the pictures, and so on and so forth here on Boots on the Ground, which is exactly what we're going to do. That's what we're going to get into right now, because it's time, as usual, for our, oh no, Will ran away from me. Will, what happened to Will? Where Will go? There's Will. I lost Will, but I found Will. Will, I found you. I'm sorry about that, sir. So we are here in our City Circuit segment, as usual, every week. We're trying to figure out, how is this team wired? Why are they doing what they are doing? If they're having troubles, what's the issue? If they're really succeeding out of nowhere, why is it happening? Last week in City Circuits, we dove into their success with the long ball, and that has continued from their 3-3 game against the LA Galaxy. Part of that was because of necessity. They didn't have a lot of time, and there's a lot of ground to cover on a football field in just a few possessions, and that's what they had to do. So let's dive into the first one. We're going to go in chronological order. We're going to break down all three of the João Klauss goals. It's the first ever hat trick in St. Louis City history. We have the first ever goalie point as well from the secondary assist on the last one for Berkey. So we have to take time and look at these ones, and also everything we've been talking about on this podcast for the last two episodes was kind of reinforced by these three Klauss goals. So we're going to dive into the three Klauss goals, and then we have some other plays from the LA Galaxy game we're going to dive into. And because we always get to our first picture here, and I'm going to throw it over to Will Bratton, because let's actually get Will back on screen here. We're running the show from two different locations. There it is. We're running the show from two different locations for the first time, and it's a little bit different. I got all my graphics a little bit different here. Thanks a lot. By the way, Will,
don't get mad at Rock. Get mad at me. I have
how's your face
surgery.
feeling? How's your face feeling, Will? Let's get into this real quick.
I mean, it's not going to get any uglier, so we're good on that front, but it feels okay. The swelling's pretty much down. Actually, around this afternoon, today was my first day, returning to work, and I came back on Next Gen STL on the Lou Information Station. Shout out the show. It was very fun. With Grant.
Will got beat up in an alley in the tough streets of Chesterfield, and it's been a tough recovery.
Well, I noticed then my stitches were starting to loosen up, which means it's healing. They're like the dissolving ones, I think. And so it's feeling better. Moral of the story. It doesn't hurt as bad, so I'm happy. For those who aren't curious at all, I'm going to tell you anyway. I had a very minor mouth surgery. That's all it was on Monday. So we're back in action. But it's my fault that we're in separate studios because of that. And it's my fault that we're doing things a little later than usual because of that. But couldn't go around the surgery. So that's where we're at. So let's get into this play. The first of
little mouth surgery. That's what the kids are calling it today. Okay, fair enough. Will Bratton.
What do you mean by that, Rock?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Goal number one for St. Louis City SC. This one's a little bit different. We had to break this one down into two separate breakdowns here. I have two different screenshots here because this is the original possession for St. Louis City. And I wanted to clip this one off because it has what we were talking about earlier, which is them playing it up to Tallon. Because you can see right here, right off the bat,
he's so high.
He's so high, and I want
stretching the Galaxy so far apart, like pizza dough. Like we're all just ripping them apart. It's awesome what he can provide. Anyway, sorry, continue.
No, you're all good. And I think this is a useful photo because it shows just how different the formation actually is when the game gets going. We already showed you in the passing network that even though it's a 4-2-3-1, you saw it, Tallon's super high. It's not a 4-2-3-1 in actuality for average positioning of the game. And right here you can see it. Hebert and Baumgartel are both on the right side of the field. Reed's all onto the left side of the field. Tallon's way up high. Bescher's the striker. Klauss is in the hole. Hartle's in the deep midfield, kind of supporting the opposite side from Watson Morales, who have the ball right now and who are super close together. So it just, in the moment, looks very different from usual. And eventually you're going to see what happens here, which is they're going to play this one up to Totland up there high at the top of the screen. They play it to Bescher short on a long ball. Klauss loops around, and now and Bescher's going to put a little long ball over to Thomas Totland. Then they're going to lose the ball after Totland can't really handle it, and that's going to bring us to the actual moment that takes us to this goal. And I'll pass this one off to Will Bratton.
Yeah, this is where things get pretty fun for St. Louis. So you can see Pompeiu's kind of got the ball. This is kind of an unforced turnover from the Galaxy, I would say, because they kind of won the ball back from Tots. Didn't really have numbers back.
Yeah, they cleared it. They just
so many numbers up, and they just booted it. So.
Yeah, they just roofed it in the air, and Pompeiu's right there. This is right before the ball bounces and he kind of settles it, because you can see here both Totland and Hartl are in offsides positions.
Right. And so the key here is João Klauss is in an onside position too. So the defense has to worry about him, and they have to worry about Hartl and Totland coming back in and being involved in the play. So it's actually a really tough situation for the Galaxy defense, especially with only three back, in like a 3CB look. It kind of looked like Melberg ball for the LA Galaxy right there for a brief moment. But you're going to see Pompeu is going to get this ball up to Klauss, and immediately I want to highlight the positioning of Akil Watts, because I think he finds what they call in hockey a quiet place on the ice. I think he found a quiet place on the pitch here to really stay in a dangerous position. Obviously, he's not going to really be involved in this play, but I want to highlight his positioning here, because if Hartl gets stood up at the edge of the 18, Watts is in such a good position to fill the space behind a Betcher run that takes a man away, or even a Totland run in deep, and just fire a one-time shot from the top of the 18, and then you have Betcher and Totland crashing the net. So Watts found a very good spot here. And I know that's not at all what this play is truly about, but I want to highlight that because I think Watts actually had a pretty solid game against the Galaxy. So shout out to Akil Watts for that play. But what we're going to see here is the very increasingly rare, for some reason, St. Louis City SC through ball. And yes, you heard me correctly. City played a through ball, and it's from Marcel Hartl to João Klauss right here, splitting the line for the LA Galaxy defense. And João Klauss is just going to find a way past Nikola Micevic with a little bit of a left-footed nutmeg shot here. Not the highest XG. I believe his XG was lower, or his XGOT was lower than his XG, pardon me, which means that he didn't do the most with that shot, but he did enough to get the job done, and that's really all that matters, especially when you're getting the go-ahead goal at home. A good goal there. And again, Rock and I know we're going to talk about this later, because I saw Rock right before we went live, or right before we started recording, flipping through some of the scenes that we've got for this show. Of course, he does the production, right? And I saw "Say It With Us" at the top, and I know what's going to come after that. I know what's going after that.
Don't bury my lead. Don't ruin my joke, damn it.
I'm not going to ruin it for you, Rock. But this is in fact a repeatable goal scoring sequence for St. Louis City, and it's one that we haven't seen enough. Just a simple, quick pass up high, a quick drop ball to Hartl, a sort of a drop ball. It's kind of lateral, and then a through ball. And then you get a shot on goal. And let's say Klauss doesn't score it. Maybe it's a good save. Maybe it's a corner kick. Maybe it's a rebound for Totland or Betcher to be streaking into. Maybe it gets to, popped in the air, and Akil Watts is streaking in, like I said, has pretty quiet place on the pitch here to make a run in deep. So, I mean, it's just such a good sequence for me. I loved the sequence from City. I'm watching it from up high in the media booth was very satisfying, because these are the types of things that we need to see more of. And that's why I'm so glad we're doing City Circuit as part of Boots on the Ground, because we get to look at these types of things and highlight what are the ways that City can consistently find goal scoring opportunities. So that's what Rock and I are bringing here, and that's how we got this first goal from João Klauss here.
I also think it reinforces some of the things we were talking about yesterday, or last week, when we were talking about Cities being able to get in positioning against the Portland Timbers, where they had 4-on-4 and 5-on-5 matchups. And what you're looking at here on this first goal is that it's not even that. They don't even have numbers. But one thing we haven't seen from City that we saw is their ability to just turn up field and take advantage of what they have created. Because right here in this moment, as Pompeu gets it up to Klauss, if you do the thing where you draw a line right where the ball is, it could be a 4-on-4, but it's more like a 4-on-5. But the big thing is all you have to do is just isolate one or two defenders with this Klauss and Hartl dribbling, and that's all you really need to do to open things up and get Klauss through. And again, the big thing was just this defender slides down in front of Hartl, and tries to take the ball away here, and Hartle just slides it right past him, right to João Klauss, and Klauss is able to skimp right through the two. Kind of they pinch right there, and they're too late. And that was the big difference. It was an impressive pass by Hartle, but for me, there was a mentality of City just saying, let's turn on the advantageous position and let's go get a goal. And I think that was a problem at times throughout the game. They needed to do it more. We were just talking about getting Thomas Totland higher up, talking to David Critchley in the post game. He's high up. That's a big part of the game, but they need to get the ball on his foot in more commanding moments for him to change the game. And I think you saw, it's all just about getting the ball in better positions for St. Louis City SC. And I think you're seeing the potential of what they're doing with this goal, with this ball. They got the ball up to Totland, but it wasn't in the most advantageous position. But you see the kind of, it's eventually just, if you pressure the right parts enough, you stretch defenses out enough, you will create more advantageous positions for yourself. And that's exactly what they did on this goal.
Exactly. And that's why this pass from Pompeu to Klauss is going to probably show up purple on that passing map that we were looking at, the passing network. So that's going to be an XT generating opportunity. Your threat is going to increase when you play a ball directly to Klauss instead of Pompeu taking the opportunity to try and go one-on-one there. Said he don't really have numbers in the box. So him getting wide and trying to get across and doesn't really do all that much for City here. So I love Pompeu passing that opportunity up, giving it to the big man up top and just letting him go to work. So this is just really, really good stuff and repeatable stuff all around. So, repeatable stuff gets us excited here on Boots on the Ground. And in the city.
Also, I'll harp on this. I didn't pull a cut, but there was a moment in the game where Klauss won the ball on the wing and then hustled his ass back. And in fact, I'm just gonna say right now, we're gonna do another episode. We're gonna do another episode at the beginning of the week to talk about what they talk about at training and what happens over the weekend in the MLS, because there's some things from the LA Galaxy game I didn't get a chance to pull that I really want to talk about, because Klauss is right there. Hartle's higher than him. Totland's higher than him. Look how deep Bescher is. But the hold-up play for Klauss is what makes this happen. It's obviously the goal-scoring aspect for Klauss, but it's the fact that Pompeu can get the ball for him and he can create the 1-2 with Marcel Hartle right off the bat. Yes, the goal scoring is a huge aspect for Klauss, but if you only choose to focus on the goal scoring and ignore everything João Klauss is doing, you're missing so much of what he does. And the LA game was a fantastic example of that. And if we do not send that message home in this episode, come back on Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to try to do it again. Let's move on to our second play, our second João Klauss goal of the game. This was for the second half. They had just come back for the second half in this game. City was tied with LA 1-1. And as you can see here, LA starts with this one in possession, trying to link up here. And I'll let Will take it from there.
Yeah, this is the beauty of your target nine, by the way, cutting the pitch in half. And a lot of coaches will talk about this with their teams, but it's not something that they really talk about tactically with the media. But part of João Klauss's job is with the press is to decide which half of the pitch they want to try and box the opponent into. So in this case, it's their defensive right side of the pitch, Totland and Watts' side of the pitch per se. And so that's João Klauss's job. He's cutting off the pass to that central center back here. That's why his positioning is there and allowing that pass into that midfielder. Obviously, you could cut that pass off, but that doesn't necessarily give City the opportunity to win the ball. It just gives Galaxy the free opportunity to cycle it through their backs, as you're going to see that yellow dot central here. He's cutting that pass off. And so by doing that, it gives Hartle the opportunity to win, or make a challenge for what could be a 50-50 ball if he hustles. And that's exactly what happens here. And then we're going to see Pompeu step up into the carnage here and just slot a gorgeous one over the top to João Klauss. And that ball over the top to João Klauss is just a thing of beauty. Klauss said in the post-match presser, his first touch wasn't so great. He made it harder on himself than he had to, and that's true. But he still roofed it, absolutely blasted it top bins on the near post here, as we're going to see. Who is that you've circled?
I'm 99% sure that is, of course, fellow German Cedric Teuchert. This is about another second or so forward. So Pompeu puts the ball forward to Klauss, and you know what's going to happen here. And yeah, this is Klauss with the ball right there. And of course, Cedric Toyshirt is enjoying what he's seeing.
Yes, it's always fun when you see your balding Brazilian designated player, number 9, in behind the opposing defense. Of course, right here, he's about to take his first touch on this ball. And we know that it's going to go wider than he'd like. But at the end of the day, João Klauss absolutely blasts it past Nikola Micevic. And this is another opportunity where Klauss, for this, I think maybe the first time this match, but it'll be the second time when he scores the third goal, where the XGOT was higher than the XG opportunity. And the XG opportunity being a little lower was because his first touch wasn't good, and he didn't put himself in the most advantageous position to finish here. But he has that rifle of a right foot and just absolutely scorched it top bins. And so that's the type of thing that you need to see from your designated players, is making something even maybe with a little bit of a mistake. You got to capitalize on those opportunities. João Klauss recently has not done that. Obviously, in 2023, we know that he did that even more so than usual. He was outperforming his XG. Now he's starting to settle back into the mean after underperforming more recently. So this is good stuff to see from João Klauss, and you want to see him get hot. You want to see him get on a goal-scoring tear. These are all the things you want to see. But this is such a repeatable goal-scoring sequence. And this, by the way, is the most like St. Louis City SC goal probably of the year, because it's forced on a pressing situation. And then Pompeu just stepping in with a beautiful curler to Klauss. Like, it doesn't get much more city than that if you're thinking nostalgia 2023. Not that was that long ago, but those are the highs we still have to ride after missing the playoffs in 2024. So that's kind of where you're at here. This is a repeatable goal-scoring sequence.
Say it with us. Yeah, Hartl in that position. I mean, it's clearly, you can see in the first half where the press triggers were developing over on the defensive right side for St. Louis City. That was something that they were opening up and really able to enact on. It eventually kind of, I think, maybe bit them, maybe credit to LA Galaxy for reading that they were picking up those spots of the triggers and saying, okay, we're going to stretch this team out. We're going to use those moments to maybe pull them apart without falling into these moments where we give up the easy turnover like this one, because they really did stretch them out. And David Critchley talked about that in the post game as well. The biggest issue with the defense, and not with the defense, just with the team, was they were stretched out too far, and their positioning wasn't great as things continue to go. But this one, absolutely fantastic. To your point, one of my favorite parts about this, which I kind of got into the illustration, was Hartl did a fantastic little bump to just completely open up the space. The LA Galaxy player was almost there, and then Hartl just gives him a little bit of a shoulder to separate him from the ball right there, and that opens up that space for Celio Pompeu. And then, of course, you get our boy Klauss running onto it, and Cedric Toyshirt knows what's about to happen. He had no doubt that Klauss was going to get this brace.
You need that confidence too. That's a great sign. It's a team that's trusting in each other and believes in the process that they're under. So that's for mentality's sake, that's a cool thing to see.
Yes, it is. And let's roll on to goal number 3. Obviously, it was a little rough that St. Louis City had to be in this position to have to come back and tie the game again, considering how back and forth everything goes. Of course, they're up 1-0 because of the Klauss goal. They're tied 1-1 6 seconds later because of the Chavez goal. They take the lead in the 47th minute. 4 minutes later, Nascimento strikes back, and then you lose the lead. You fall to 3-2 to another Gabriel Chavez goal, and you needed this to finally tie things back up. But as we've just been talking about, the ability for this team to go long and the ability for João Klauss to make things happen came in handy in a clutch moment, and it was able to salvage a point in a game that otherwise would have been a complete and total disaster.
Yeah, Rock, it's really important that you went through all of this on last week's City Circuit, looking at the Portland game and how Critch loves the long ball, because this is what we're going to see. We're seeing we got arrows now. Okay, we're getting high tech. So we got you're really not ready for the next few things. If you're getting big on arrows, just wait till you see the trapezoid in the next one. Hold up. All right. This is exciting stuff. Let's see. We'll go through it step by step. We'll get the organic excitement here. So we've got some arrows. That's where the ball's going.
Yes,
I
because
love the screenshot that you chose right before this of the ball, like City in possession. The ball's like in the air.
It's up here. It's kind of hard. We're not looking down at it. I need to get like a drone at these games, make things a little bit easier. So I'm just trying to show you the ball is in the air. It's not on stuff. It's not on the ground. It's in the air. It's coming down. It's going to fall into Baumgartel's head.
Yes. And Baumgartel is going to do what a lot of times your designated, your target 9 is going to do, which is flick the ball on to somebody going in behind. In this case, it was Timo Baumgartel flicking it into Joao Klauss. So, and then, obviously that shot is maybe not the most repeatable thing ever. 0.02 XG opportunity up to a 0.52 XGOT. So Klauss, an absolute scorcher of a shot. That was one of my favorite goals in the history of the club, to be honest with you.
At the same time, I do want to point out, so taking the screenshots and then breaking them down, this is what it looks like. And then I zoomed in to get really exact pictures of where these players were on the field. This is almost an exact representation of where everyone was on the field. What in the hell were the LA Galaxy doing in this moment, trying to protect a 3-2 lead, having 5 for 5 here, but not really? You have 2 ahead of the ball here. I'm not sure what they were doing in this defense. So having a long ball, Timo Baumgartel having a big moment, Joao Klauss having a big moment, those things are in and of themselves repeatable, but I don't know if you can count on any other team in the MLS screwing up a deep ball defense like the LA Galaxy did with this setup, just handing an easy go to St. Louis City SC.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I will say in this case, them having a poor defensive setup, and look at the man north of Hartle, by the way, in that frame a moment before, he was not goal side as well. I'm not sure if Pompeii's inside, so they probably didn't have another man out wide. So, this is just bad defensive setup from the Galaxy. But in this situation, Klauss is in has a man, or a man has Klauss, I should say. And Timo Baumgartel's got pressure too. So I don't think Galaxy's terrible setup here really is what cost them. I think it was good play from City. And I think this
undoubtedly
is
was.
They can do against other teams repeatedly.
Undoubtedly was. I just feel like these 2 guys here in front of Baum, Instead of needing 3 guys to pressure Baum, you probably have somebody sitting behind Jake Erdwood-Reich in Pompeii's spot. Right. And then one of these guys is actually getting in the air. The fact that nobody gets in the air there's 3 guys right there and no one's in the air actually contesting Baumgartel.
That's bad.
That's terrible.
That's the type of thing that gets sprints run for an entire training in the 98-degree heat. Yeah. You're in St. Louis coming up. It's going to be hot.
And listen, great ball from Baumgartel, falls onto Klaus's feet. Fantastic finish from Klauss. But that's some terrible LA defending. And that's why I think 3 for 3 is not representative of where this game should have been, in my opinion. I think a more accurate representation would have been probably like a 2-2 tie or a 2-1 win for one of these squads.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The only other major thing I did want to highlight about this sequence is a lot of people are probably going to have the thought of, well, it was a 0.02 XG opportunity. How is that repeatable? How are they going to continue to score off those types of things? But I want to look at the very last frame, if you don't mind going towards the very last frame of that animation. And what you're going to see here is JGR, Pompeiu, Hartle, Baumgartel, Silva, all options that Klauss could just kind of chop the ball across the 6 and just look for some ping pong action, look for some pinballing around and just try and find a shot on net. Obviously, he was feeling it. He's on a brace. I don't have a problem with him shooting this, to be honest with you. Even if he missed, I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. But it's, it is repeatable in the sense that if he wasn't feeling hot and he wasn't trusting that cannon, he has the easy opportunity to just one time it across the 6 and see what happens. So I would say it's repeatable in that sense. So I just wanted to quickly touch on that.
That's completely fair. The least repeatable of the 3, I'd say even in the buildup, but nonetheless, the buildup just drives home that guys like Baumgartel, guys like Berkey, you can build a style to create offense in different moments, and that's also a big thing. Yeah, that's not a sustainable thing game in and game out. But the fact that you have the people who can create those moments, that you have a Berkey who can put a pinpoint ball there, that you have a Baumgartel who can win a header and direct it there, and then you have a Klauss who I know everyone doesn't like it. The bottom line is he has very good natural striker instincts for sensing a run, and he made a perfect one there. Let's roll on. We're gonna get into some not so positives here because we're talking a lot of positives, but not a lot of negatives. My apologies.
Got us dancing around.
Yeah, the StreamYard.
Trapezoids. You're not kidding.
The StreamYard did not want to work for me here. So exactly. I told you trapezoids. So this is really early on in the game, and I'm just going to take a look. My screenshots are just going to be a bunch of defensive plays early and often, or moments for St. Louis City SC. And this is late in the 11th minute, just before we cross over to the 12th minute. And this isn't even the very first time we see them get exposed. Right out of the gate, the first play of the game, they got exposed in that defensive left channel by the LA Galaxy. And this is one where I want to just highlight another one. Started because of a long ball from the left side of the LA Galaxy offense to their right side. And look what happens. One thing that we going through some of these, and if you watch the game, you'll notice, is that yes, Tottenham's playing super high offensively, but he was getting back because he had to because of Paintsil. But because he's playing so high defensively, Hebert and Baumgartel were a little bit more shifted to over his side to the right. And the compensation was because you can't just leave Jay Reed with Peck the entire game. So Celio Pompeu was fairly deep on Jay Reed's side the majority of the game. With that said, though, can't be having situations where they both take an outside guy like this and completely leave all of that green space to go. Because, again, Baumgartel is central a little bit, very central, a little bit more to the left than maybe you would expect him to be, or the right than you'd expect him to be. So he can't cover that. You got Alfie Morales trying to cover this on a run. You're just completely lucky this didn't turn into a worse situation for St. Louis City. And this is an example of just a lot of the issues they had over on that defensive left side. I don't think it necessarily was Jay Reed's fault. I just think LA Galaxy did a good job of finding a spot where they could attack because Paintsil, Peck on each side, there's going to be holes, and the LA Galaxy did a good job of finding those holes. Critch did a good job of trying to fill them back in, and it was a little bit of a chess battle throughout the entire match.
Yeah, this is a good one to highlight. Honestly, I don't think this is Jay Reed's fault at all. I think the problem, I think it's his job to go and step to that ball and create pressure there. I think Morales needs to be goal side to his man. I think Pompeu needs to be, maybe Critch wants to double team on the wings, and that's fine. I think, I would rather him be in behind too.
I think Jay Reed is actually supposed to be pinching down for this runner, and Pompeu was supposed to cover like a longer run on a winger like this one, because again, this is just 10 minutes after they literally drug Jay Reed out to the wing after overlapping past Pompeu and then snuck a runner in behind him. So I feel like we saw Jay Reed kind of pinching in more, and we saw a lot of Pompeu covering the far left side of the flank. So I feel like the only person who could have been in this position to cover where this trapezoid is Jay Reed, because they hadn't shifted Baum back over to the left. That would come a little bit later on in the game to cover that channel.
I can definitely agree with that. I will say this is one of the challenges that's posed when you switch back to a 4-back versus a 5-back. You lose that extra man to cover that channel. And this is literally it could not be a more perfect highlight of exactly what that drawback can look like in certain situations. Obviously, with the 5-back, has its own drawbacks of losing some of your attacking power. But this is one of the defensive drawbacks associated with going back to that 4-back situation, especially for a St. Louis City team who, when your back line in this match was like Baumgartel, Hebert, Tots, and Reed, it's definitely not ideal with Kessler injured, Horn wasn't good to start here. Oh man.
We knew you well, but we've forgotten your name already.
Yeah, shout out Giannis Horn, man. I'm definitely gonna miss him. Fantastic player. I wish him and his family the best. I'm happy they decided to make the decision that was best for their family versus choosing the team. But obviously, it's very sad to see them go. So,
and with that hard transition, we'll move on to my next play, which was just about a minute later for St. Louis City. That one was at the end of. It was actually about 20 seconds later. And this one is a couple different screenshots because they were just getting opened up. So first thing I want to highlight, and this is going to connect to our third and final of these screenshots in just a moment. But I just want to highlight something here. You can look at St. Louis City. They're in a fairly standard defensive 4-4-2 for what they play. Hartle and Klauss up high. Watson, Morales in the middle. Pompeu and Bescher wide, and our 4-man back. But the reason why I want to highlight this right here is Baumgartel doing what he does. We know he likes to do it. He likes to step up into
pressure
defenders.
This is a classic pressure cover situation with your center backs. Classic
pressure cover situation here. But maybe a little bit less pressure and a little bit more cover. Maybe a little bit less pressure from Baum and maybe a little bit more cover from Kyle Hiebert, because if you see what's developing here, he's just going to make things pretty easy. He's just gonna sidle this little pass off because, I mean, maybe Hiebert should be pressuring. I'm not sure. We're going to get into that here in a moment. But he's able to make a pretty easy pass here. And then as soon as that pass is made, well, Marco Reus is already got a step on Akil Watts here. And so what's going to happen? He's just going to make that run there. He's going to make that pass. And then look at the situation we have just 3 seconds later, which is Marco Reus. He's going to run into open field here past Kyle Hiebert, past Jay Reed, into open field. Nothing comes of it, but it was a very dangerous situation, and it was disappointing how easy the LA Galaxy were just able to use this quick little 1-2 pass, kind of like St. Louis City did, just to completely open up the St. Louis midfield. And I just wanted to highlight it because, again, I love the way that Baum plays, but I do think it shows you, even to your point with the 4-man back, if you're going to have this aggressiveness, it is going to bite you in moments. And just a good passing and moving moment for the Galaxy, but also too easily allowed from the St. Louis City defense.
Yeah, I want to look at that first screenshot again really quickly because I want to say this is truthfully for me. I think, honestly, Hiebert and Baumgartel played this very well. I think Reed and Tots are both in very good positions. This is on Akil Watts for not staying goal side to his man in this situation and allowing a world-class player in Marco Reus to get the ball in space and have the opportunity to slot something through. So for me, this one's really on Akil Watts. I don't really see this as a huge problem with the back line. However, I do 100% agree that when you have this 4-back, and if you're going to be aggressive on your back line, it's going to have your drawbacks if you don't play it correctly in the midfield, because when that drop pass is available, you're going to have all sorts of problems in behind. And obviously, for me, I don't want to see Timo Baumgartel stay back here, because then if you allow that man to turn and be facing the goal, then you have all sorts of problems. You've allowed them to break a line on just a turn, and that's not good enough for City. So for me, this one is on Akil Watts for not staying with his man here. But City were in a decently favorable position to defend it. This screenshot is a little more scary just because of the potential 2-on-1 against Jay Reed. But other than that, everyone else is in a good position to defend.
But isn't the Jay Reed position, that problem, exacerbated by just how far away Baum is from the play now? Baumgartel's in line with an Akil Watts who was retreating. I mean, this is a 10-yard difference between Akil Watts and Baumgartel with 11:20 on the clock. 3 seconds later, and Akil Watts is running past Timo Baumgartel, and
Baumgartel's completely eliminated his man from the play, because you can see where he's by the referee. I mean, he's nowhere involved in the play.
Well, I mean, his man wasn't. I mean, was his man eliminated from the play? You feel like he made a pretty solid passing effort here.
Yes, but I mean, after this pass in the next screenshot.
But there's got to be something. There's got to be a rotation, doesn't there? I mean, the bottom line is you can't allow just 20 yards of free run from Marco Reus. Someone has to.
No, I completely agree with that.
Someone has to react and rotate, and whether that's Kyle Hiebert dropping off deeper instead of. I think the issue here might be that maybe Hiebert takes one step maybe towards Nascimento here, and that means that when he's trying to get back, he's behind Marco Reus. But it was too easy of a moment for the LA Galaxy, and the reason why I'm highlighting is just. The defense was the bigger issue in this game. The offense, we talked about a lot of positivities here. A lot of talent on the LA Galaxy roster. That's why it's weird to call them the worst team in the league, because the roster certainly isn't anywhere near the worst team in the league. There's a lot of talent there, but there's also a reason that Marco Reus has struggled the majority of his time in MLS.
Yeah. That could be a fun conversation sometime to talk about Marco Royce, but I think is that the last screenshot you have for this?
I got one more.
One more.
Because
Okay, we got one more left in this part of the city circuit here.
we cannot walk away without talking about the moment that should have completely changed the game. And this was 4 minutes later. Okay, so this is 4 minutes later, and now you're in
I don't
your
even
own
want to talk
half.
about this.
And yeah, I'm going to talk about this. Damn it! So here's the thing. Now you got both of your center backs, and they both decide to play pressure. What in God's name are we doing?
Communication, boys, come on.
Hebert's
you're a loud guy.
Here.
You talk to Timo.
And my thing here is that, and this is where, it's like, is it positioning? Is it communication? Is it tendency? Because obviously Timo is going to be the guy who jumps and pressures more often, but Kyle obviously jumps and pressures too. Timo pressures, and then, there's the guy you really should never leave with that much green all around him. That's Paintsill. He's running free and clean. And obviously,
I can't believe he screwed that up.
This doesn't end in a goal. So this is just another thing I wanted to highlight, because you saw a lot of moments where City got bit by moments that bit 2024 City and 2023 City, which is defenders or midfielders stepping up and taking themselves out of defensive positions, turnovers in the midfield that left certain players in terrible positions. Because not only is this bad for Hebert and Baumgartel, this isn't his fault, but I mean, Tots is 20 yards behind Paintsill.
That's not the biggest problem here. That's not necessarily Tots' fault. That's
exactly,
it's drawback of the game plan.
Because in so many of the things that we've shown you, Hebert is covering this area of the field usually. Right. And Tots has been up in this field the entire time. And so that's definitely not Tottenham's fault. But the bottom line is, we got to put a red body here somewhere, and the closest one is 20 yards away, and it's Thomas Totland. And so it was a terrible play. It all went bad. Yes, it's not something that's going to happen over and over again, but it just exacerbated the issues we've seen with this system they've played on the defensive side, which is they get exposed because of the littlest mistakes. I know that's soccer in and of itself, but City has been just a perfect example of it now for over 2 years. And at some point, you have to find the balance.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. Like you said, this is not something that's going to repeatedly happen, but the times that it does happen a few times a season could completely change a game, like it could have against the LA Galaxy. It obviously ends in a draw. This could have been the decider in getting 0 points in a match that you really should have won and needed to win. So bad. Just bad. Not good. Bad. The opposite of good.
Bad. The opposite of good. Indeed, it is, in fact, the opposite of good. Thank you very much for pointing that out to everyone on the show. Bad, the opposite of good. That has been this week's edition of City Circuit. So as we figure out how is St. Louis City SC wired, we got into a lot today. We are not done. Got a couple more segments here before we wrap up the show. Will, one thing going on right now, of course, in the world of soccer that everybody is talking about has been the Club World Cup. Obviously, it's been a big deal. The games have been crazy. There's been some controversy because they're playing games at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and they're shocked that they're only getting 46,000 people. But there have been some big moments. Obviously, today, or I should say Thursday, there was a huge moment when Inter Miami got the first ever win for an MLS team over a European squad with a 2-1 win over Porto. And a big part of that game was how much Inter Miami was using homegrown players and not all those Messi friends we talked about. Messi did have a goal, the game-winning goal in the 54th minute, but a lot of young players for Inter Miami helping MLS get their first ever win over UEFA competition. Pretty big day for MLS.
Yeah, and I actually saw Matt Doyle tweet about this, about how they had the 3 homegrown players and those who aren't, utilizing their homegrowns. It's a problem. I will say every situation is different with each club. Not every club has homegrowns that are ready to make the jump yet. Yeah. You have to develop your players. You can't just throw them onto the squad and expect them to have success. It can sometimes ruin their career if you do that too soon. So it is different for every team, but I agree. Every team needs to be using the, homegrowns it's a great way to underpay a player or even overpay a player with the MLS roster rules that are extremely complicated. So very, very fun story with Miami. Obviously Messi, scoring a beautiful set piece and in the most messy fashion ever to win the match is pretty fun. And it's cool stuff to see. You like to see MLS teams winning. No matter how much you hate Miami, it's good to see an MLS team beat, a quality European team in Porto. So definitely a fun one for me. But the whole topic of the timing of the matches, I don't really know what FIFA expected, to be honest with you. I mean, like it's like 4 or 1 p.m. or something like that. Some of these matches on a busy city or in a busy city on a weekday.
Some of these are being exacerbated by playing in too big of a stadium because some of them have been very bad. There's no doubt about it. Getting 3,400 people at a game in Orlando was not good. Now, do we want to focus on the fact that was the matchup between the South Korean club and the South African club? And so how many people in America are going to be locked into that? I think we should probably focus on that, but I think other people want to ignore it. But you're getting 60,000 people in Miami to watch Real Madrid. That's the team. When people want to see a quality club, they're putting 62,000 in the building. Even for Fluminense and Borussia Dortmund in East Rutherford in New York, New Jersey, 34,000. They put 40,000 into the Rose Bowl for Monterrey and Inter Milan. You might say, well, that's a Mexican club. What about 12,000 for River Plate and the Aurora Red Diamonds? Again, are we really going to be surprised that there's only 12,000 people watching an Argentinian club team versus a Japanese team? Essentially two groups that do not have any players that anybody who's a casual soccer fan in America has heard of. That's just a fact of the matter. And I just don't know why we're surprised that there's only 12,000 there. But being able to consistently turn around and you got 26,000 people into Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia to watch Brazil play Tunis. And it was a Brazilian team, Flamengo, play the club from the city of Tunis. That's awesome. I don't know how these are the numbers that people are bitching about. It's insane to me. You're getting 60,000 for the big names. You put 80,000 in the Road Bowl for Atletico Madrid and PSG. Big names getting big amounts of people in there. If you want to complain to me that you're only getting 30 grand in MetLife Stadium and it looks bad, you picked the wrong venue and you need to go home and be happy with 30 grand for watching Palmeiras and Al Ahly. We're 35,000 is an extremely good number for that. I can't believe we're actually seeing people complain about this stuff.
Yeah, honestly, I was a little worried that it was going to be worse than it is. I'm not really all that upset with it. I will say, obviously, the 3,400 in Orlando isn't a good look, but you got to look at the two teams that are playing and the demographic of the Orlando area. It's like no one in the Orlando area is going to care about that match for the most part. And besides the diehard soccer fans, and they showed up, 3,400 of them showed up, so, and maybe a few travelers too. But in general, those aren't clubs that are so massive and followed widely that their fans are also going to travel that well. So you just can't expect much of anything for those types of matches. If it was those two teams, but it was a championship match, I bet it would have been packed out because it would have been a much more interesting. But it's opening round, group play. It's not the most interesting matchup for the locals. Obviously, I'm not saying it's a boring matchup in terms of soccer. I think it's a cool matchup. But for the locals, it's boring.
And listen, they're fumbling the bag on a couple of these. And I'll say this right now. Real Madrid playing Pachuca in Charlotte. Why are they not playing in Florida in someplace? That would make a lot of sense to me. Again, you put 62,000 into Miami in the Hard Rock Stadium for Real Madrid and Al Hilal out of Saudi Arabia. Why are we playing in Charlotte? Great stadium, great fan base for their team. Let's do Real Madrid and one of the biggest Mexican teams. Let's do that in Florida or something like that because you're going to absolutely jam-pack the stadium there. Orlando gets the Manchester City Juventus game. That's fine. That'll probably do a lot better than the previous game they got.
I'd pay $1 for that game.
Yeah, exactly. You'd pay for that game. It's going to be a lot better. Some of these other matchups that are still on the way, I guarantee you are going to see huge numbers. Coming up on Saturday, River Plate and Monterey at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena on a Saturday night.
Pretty well.
That's going to do $80,000. Again, I'm not sure why we're complaining about these things. A match I hope we see them lose. LAFC faces off against Flamengo in Orlando.
I want to see the MLS teams win. I do. I don't like LAFC.
I want to see. I want to see them win to a point. But LAFC is going to beat, I think, Esperance de Tunis, and that'll put them in potentially a chance because Flamengo and Chelsea play each other. They're both leading the Group D right now in the Club World Cup. I want to see American teams win, but I want to see them lose in their group because I do not want them getting money. And that's what you get when you win Club World Cup games is you get a bunch of flipping money. And these SOBs in Miami and Florida already have all the damn money. And so them winning games means they get more of the damn money. And so I'm happy for Inter Miami. Congratulations on making MLS history. I hope you lose 9-0 against Palmeiras coming up this weekend.
It's a fair take. It's a fair take. But it's not the take that I have. But I understand.
Will Bratton helps us cover St. Louis City SC here for STL Sports Central, and that's so great considering he's an Inter Miami fan. I love that. I love that you can separate those kind of things. That's awfully big of you, and I'm impressed.
I'm gonna punch you. You're lucky we're not in the studio.
I'd like to see you try. There was some other breaking news today for St. Louis City SC, and that was congratulations to the goalkeeper, RB1 Roman Berkey. Put a ring on it, reportedly, and I say reportedly only because I have to. We saw the Instagram photos. Congratulations to Roman Berkey. That has led to a bit of fallout discussion in the St. Louis City SC fan base. We all knew what was happening in the first place. This isn't shocking to anybody.
I've been talking about this since the offseason.
Yeah, we've been talking about this since the offseason. I personally think the Chicago Fire want to develop long-term with their current young goalkeeper who's showing a lot of great talent, and therefore I don't think we need to have this conversation, and that's only because I don't want to have it.
That's fair. I also don't think that this is something that's going to be a problem for St. Louis. Is it possible? Is it in the realm of possible items? Yes. If Chicago are willing to severely overpay, like Rocchio is kind of showing here with the throwing money, if they're willing to severely overpay, okay, maybe it happens. But I just honestly don't think that's going to be something that we see for St. Louis. I agree with Rocchio. I think they want long-term success. They're building a stadium that's going to be ready in 2 years or something like that. So that's very exciting stuff for them. I don't think they're worried about trying to get he'll be 35 next year. I don't think that's a good investment for Chicago Fire at this point. But it's possible. But I truly believe that Roman Berkey will be staying in St. Louis. I think he'll sign again for a new contract.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a big contract, and I think we'll get another whole round of are they paying their goalie too much right before he gets top 5 in MVP voting again.
Yeah, well.
Especially,
I don't mind. Give him
especially with the defense they're putting in front of him right now. He's going to have to finish top in the voting again because just like those first 2 years, it's going to be a Roman Berkey highlight reel in some of these games with the way the defense has been playing lately. But at least on the other side, there's now some offense to make up for it from St. Louis City SC.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, we're getting some more goals. We're also getting some more goals against. I'm sure Roman Berkey is not happy about being completely hung out to dry 3 times against the LA Galaxy. But, it happens. I mean, really 4 with the paint goal.
Exactly. And goal. We didn't dive into any of the really backbreaking moments that actually led to goals from the LA Galaxy. In the first screenshot I broke down, that was that fall down, that getting stretched apart and falling apart on the left side of the City defense was what led to probably the most recreatable goal for the LA Galaxy. But I think you saw throughout the game, and I think David Critchley in the postgame talked about getting that figured out. I think we saw the obvious issues where that was, which was back 4 against a very talented attacking line with Peck, Paintsill, Royce, and Nascimento, even without Ricky Puig, and you can't defend the whole game against them. And so that's one play that we could have broken down, but I think that there's going to be a lot of look. City's going to break that one down. You saw the way they were getting torn apart, and I think you saw that they were making moves as well. And at halftime, Baumgart was pinching more to the left. They're getting those things figured out. That's my take on the repeatable goals from LA Galaxy. The other ones, you shouldn't be passing it backwards to your goal by 50 yards when the next closest player is that far away. If you're Jay, or if you're, I'm blanking on who played it back towards Jay Reed. Zelensky plays it back to Jay Reed. You're right. So, and then Jay Reed trips over his own 2 feet. I don't want to hold that against Jay Reed. It looks stupid. It's always going to be a bad highlight for you, but it's not actually indicative of his ability. That's just a stupid play from Reed or Zelensky. Everyone's making the wrong play there. To Critchley's point, though, it's not in and of itself, it's the wrong play. But them playing the ball backwards in that situation is not the wrong play in his mind, because as you saw from all the goals, being able to draw a team in and then go over the top between the lines has become crucial for St. Louis City SC. And so their ability to pass backwards consistently and then turn it into an attack, that's necessary. And so Critchley, one of my favorite things he's said so far, pointed out that it'd be very hypocritical for him to tell his players to just stop doing something like that. But he did highlight that, yes, that one version of it, pretty crappy. So the things that doomed them in this game, although we pointed out a lot of defensive mistakes in the second half of City Circuits, the things that ultimately doomed them, they can cut that out by just making a couple better decisions. But there still needs to find some balance, like I was saying earlier, or else every game, best case scenario, is going to be a 3-2 win. And that's not sustainable, and it's going to piss Roman Berkey off. So find another way to do it.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's a very good point.
And luckily, they have plenty of time to figure it out because St. Louis City is off this weekend. That's why the players had such a long break. That's why we don't have any training takeaways. Training is actually tomorrow, or excuse me, it's on Friday afternoon. So we'll have a little bit.
If you're watching this today, it's live and posted and on the radio on the Loom information
on Friday. So it's going to be in a couple hours. It's dark right now because we're recording it on Thursday night, but it's Friday, and so training is going to be in a few hours. So look out for our socials for some updates from training, and also so no City game this weekend. It's going to be that means there's no City Central post game, but we will be back with another episode of Boots on the Ground next week. We will be on the air live after the St. Louis City game next week as they face off against Orlando City. So a lot of stuff still coming up on STL Sports Central, on City Central post game, on the City Central podcast page, on Boots on the Ground, which you can find on the City Central podcast page. It's everywhere. And of course, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button on the STLSportsCentral.com YouTube page. Again, no City game this weekend, but that does not mean there won't be plenty of St. Louis City coverage coming from STL Sports Central and from me and Will Bratton. Before we go, Will, tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
You can get me on X or Twitter at Will Bratton STL, and then you can find me on Instagram at STL City SC Views.
Hit me up at Rock STL. Let's talk a little bit about City because I'm going to be bored this weekend without a game. Plenty of Club World Cup to watch, though. Highlighted a couple of the big games coming up this weekend. We got a lot of soccer to watch, and we got plenty more soccer to talk about when we come back for another episode on Boots on the Ground.